Hi everyone. Sorry we've had some tech issues this evening. Sorry we're a little bit delayed. Hopefully you're all joining us now. If you've got any issues, just give us a little private message on Facebook and we'll sort that out for you. Hi again, I'm Emma Hume, the Programme Manager at Writing on the Wall. Welcome to our event this evening, which is of course part of our WoWFEST Lockdown Online Festival. Before we get started tonight, I just wanted to give a little plug to some of our upcoming events. Next Monday evening we have theatre critic Lynn Gardner in conversation with Director of Culture Liverpool's Claire McColgan and WoW's own Madeline Hennigan. They'll be chatting about arts and civic responsibility. On Tuesday we've got writer Ronan Hessian talking about his novel Leonard and Hungry Paul, and that starts from 6 o'clock. Long-time friend and supporter of WoW, Phil Scraton, will be with us on Wednesday talking all things COVID-19 with his event Protecting Life, Interrogating Death and Seeking Truth. There are lots more events next week and we'll be finishing the month with Jeremy Corbyn, so please make sure to check out all of our website for the details. The festival is free, but if you'd like to donate, click on the link in the comments, and all of our donations are split between fans supporting food banks, South Liverpool Domestic Abuse Service and WoW. But now to tonight's event. The Nanny State Made Me is a crucially important book right now, and I'm pretty sure Stuart couldn't have predicted we'd be in a global pandemic, one where it seems the state is failing us miserably. Being a proper northern lad, the book explores exactly what the benefits are of a fully functional NHS and welfare state, and how important it is to protect that from an advancing right-wing government. If you have questions for Stuart, pop them in the comments and we'll be sure to pass them on. He'll be in conversation tonight with our host, award-winning playwright, screenwriter and author Cash Carraway. Her play Refuge speaks to thousands of women across the UK, me included, and her memoir Skin to Estate documents her life in the gutter of austerity between 2010 and 2009. Can we give a huge wow welcome to the wonderful Cash Carraway.
Hello.
Hi Cash.
Hi. Yeah, looking forward to speaking to Stuart Maconie, the writer and broadcaster who is familiar to millions for his work in print, on radio and TV. He's a best-selling author and he currently hosts the afternoon show on BBC Six Music with Mark Radcliffe. In my little world, he is best known for coining the term Britpop and for creating the urban legend that Bob Holness from Blockbusters played sax on Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street. And now he has a brilliant new book, The Nanny State Made Me, a story of Britain and how to save it, which I guess is a celebration of the British welfare state, which he tells through his own history of growing up as a northern working class boy in Wigan. The book asks the question, what was so bad about properly funded hospitals, decent working conditions and affordable housing? What was so wrong with student grants, free eye tests and council houses? And where did it all go wrong? Please welcome Stuart Maconie. Is he there?
I am.
Hello. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you very much.
Really, it really, I really related to it in so many ways. Up until I was about 10, that was my world. And then suddenly things changed completely. I mean, now people who live in social housing are considered feckless. People on benefits are lazy. And we've got the NHS on the brink of privatisation. Where did it all go wrong, Stuart?
If you want to be very prescriptive about it, I guess it goes wrong sort of in 1979. There are two revolutions in 1979, really. The Ayatollah comes to power in Iran and begins a wave of a new kind of ideology that sweeps across that area of the world. And we in this little island, we get an entirely new form of government, different, not just a form of government. I don't want people to think that the book is just a pro-Labour, anti-conservative rant. It's not that partisan politically. I mean, because I think that some sections from time to time, you know, we've got a weird position now where you've got a conservative government having to become a statist government, which is strange, which we could never have seen coming. It's more about philosophy and political trends and thinking. And in 79, Margaret Thatcher came to power. Whatever you think of Boris Johnson, he has no ideology whatsoever.
Right.
Clearly, for him, the whole business of politics is an elaborate version of the Eton Wall game. He has no ideology. He's driven by nothing, which in some ways is not a bad thing, because he had some predecessors who were driven by ideology, the ideology that said that the state is wrong, that people who live in council houses are some kind of inferior class of humanity. The whole Thatcherite ideological drive that she and people like Keith Joseph got from these writers like Friedrich Hayek, that basically said, let us roll back the state and let us give everything into the hands. The bottom line is all that matters. Let us give everything. Let us hive off every element of our culture and the fabric of our society to entrepreneurs, or so-called entrepreneurs. And that statism in itself was a bad thing. You need to roll it back. That was a massive mistake. We were almost unique in Europe in doing that, and we have suffered the most. And so that's why, if you go like I do, if you look to Scandinavia as a model of how to run a country, they look at us with a kind of pity. You know, they kind of say, why did you do that to your own country? Which is that to say that everything is for sale, everything can be hived off, and that nothing is well, they're changing their tune now, but maybe we'll come on to that in a bit.
I was going to say, because the school system in Norway is there's no private schools, is there? Everything is state. People don't move to catchment areas to get their kids into a good school.
No, the last chapter of the book is a kind of love letter to the Nordic system, particularly Norway, which is not a particularly left-wing government. The Norwegians think their government is actually quite conservative. Right. But they're nothing like our conservatives, though, in that no one in Norway thinks that the state should be rolled back. You wouldn't get anyone in Norway using the phrase nanny state, in the same way that you wouldn't get anyone in Norway, as my friend Anne Hilde Nesset says, a Norwegian in the book, the idea of boasting about not paying your taxes in Norway is unthinkable for a grown-up person to do. It would be like boasting to your friends at the dinner party that you'd done a runner from a restaurant the night before. It would simply be a disgraceful thing for a grown-up to admit to. We, because of the culture we've had now for at least since 1979, there is no such thing as society. I'm all right, Jack. Everything is about protecting my own little world and getting on at the expense of others. And we're realizing now, I mean, the universe has, thanks to the universe for helping out with the PR for this book, we're finding out now that, in fact, no, left to our own devices, that when it comes to lads, as we say in Wigan, when it comes to the crunch, where were the entrepreneurs? They were bailing out straight away, weren't they? They were asking for handouts straight away. Where are they now? Yeah. Where are they? I can't see them. What I can see are a lot of hardworking, underpaid nurses, bin men, care home workers. I think we might. I don't want to be too rosy and optimist about this and say this is going to tilt our thinking towards a more sensible and healthy approach. But I don't think you'll hear anybody slagging off. I don't think you'll see any Conservatives applauding themselves when they turn down a nurse's pay rise in Parliament any day soon.
No. Well, let's talk about that in a bit. Let's roll it back a bit. Let's have a reading from you, and let's hear you read from the book.
This is the prologue of the book, and it kind of is where the germs. There were several incidents that made me think over a few months, and I'm perhaps coming to one of them was when I saw Daniel Hannan, who one of those arch Brexiteers who we've let kind of have a disproportionate amount of power over our culture in the last few years in politics. I saw some tweet from him where he was saying, "Oh, we don't want to go back." Jeremy Corbyn, who I'm no great Corbynista, by the way, Jeremy Corbyn, he was saying, "Oh, Jeremy Corbyn, let's not have Jeremy Corbyn in power because he'll drag us back to the 1970s." And I was like, "Hang on, let's just nail this once and for all." Let alone the great music. The 1970s, if you were a working class person, were pretty good. There were lousy times, I admit, if you were a rich major shareholder of Rio Tinto Zinc. I wasn't. Right. If you were, for most working class people, the 70s were an era where the class had some power, had decent housing, had affordable housing, had a decent education, had decent working conditions thanks to strong trade unions. And all this has been presented in this fake narrative that it was some terrible era. Well, it wasn't. Daniel Hannan, by the way, wouldn't know. He was 4 in 1978 and he lived in Peru. But anyway, by the by, that's one of those that was one of the instances where I just thought, I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
I've had enough of this reductive narrative that you get through, well-meaning BBC4 documentaries that tell us how terrible it was. And also, here's an incident that begins the book that is kind of similar. London's skyline bristles with towers, old and new, bloody and sleek, sandstone and silicon, monuments to kings and to commerce, from the Amazonian giants of the city's money jungle to the high-rise canyons of Camden. Visitor and native alike marvel at them, orient by them, lifting eyes from book or phone or feet as the train exhales into Euston, as the bus crests Muswell Hill, as you jostle through the West End. Whenever I pace the narrow lanes of Bloomsbury and Fitzrovia, I look up for one in particular. It's a Grade 2 listed building, much more familiar and human in its dimensions than the boastful monoliths of Canary Wharf. It's had many names and many lovers. It looms over works by Ian McEwan, the Goodies and Alan Moore. It's part of our shared national iconography, a symbol surely of something, vision, glamour, adventure, the white-hot future that was coming. Early in the 21st century, when we were realizing that particular future wasn't coming for most of us, I had lunch at the top of that tower in the restaurant that used to revolve there, the restaurant of failed dreams, with a man who helped to build it. I was filming an interview with Tony Benn, the grand old firebrand of the Labour movement, about the building's history. In 1966, along with holiday camp magnate Billy Butlin, as Postmaster General, he opened what was then called the GPO, or the General Post Office Tower, a new and thrilling addition to the London skyline, commissioned by the state, designed by civil servants, the draftsmen and architects of the Ministry of Public Buildings. Neither of those positions or organisations exist now. When a new Britain began to emerge at the end of the 1970s, as the first of what would become countless privatisations, the GPO Tower became first the Post Office Tower, then the Telecom Tower, and finally the BT Tower. As Tony Benn and I sat talking in that quiet restaurant, closed to the public for decades, I could sense the mounting anxiety of the slick and besuited PR man lurking nearby. Eventually, he sidled over to our table. Stuart, Tony, hi. I couldn't help noticing, guys, that you're referring to the building as the GPO Tower, he laughed nervously. It's not been that for a very long time, guys. Can I remind you, it's the BT Tower now, as in British Telecom, who own it. Tony Benn fixed him with a stare that combined pity and scorn. Excuse me, I oversaw the building and opening of this building. It was built using British labour and skills with the money of the British people who paid for it with their taxes. It belongs to them, and it always will. Margaret Thatcher took it from them and gave it to you when it was not hers to give. This isn't your building, it's theirs. And he pointed down to the streets below and the busy, swarming, preoccupied workers. It's theirs, and it was stolen from them. The PR man, wilting and tasting defeat, moved silently back into the shadows. Ben turned to me, rolled his eyes, and winked. At that point, the seed of this book was planted. What happened to the GPO Tower was the start of a story, and this is it. This is my story and your story, and how it was stolen from us. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Stuart. It must have been thrilling to meet Tony Benn.
It was, yeah, again, great. I don't agree with everything Tony Benn said.
Well, who agrees with everything anyone said?
But he was I'm a great, I guess what, I'm a great Attleite. I think we need I think a government of all the talents is a good thing, where you have, as Attlee did, Attlee on one side and Herbert Morrison on one side and Nye Bevan on the other. I think, you need people of all political, I think we're realizing that now belatedly, that a kind of grown up spectrum of political ideas is what you need on the left and on the right, yeah.
Well, the Labour Party is very much, I think, a huge spectrum. I guess that's what's caused
it should be.
Sorry?
It should be, definitely, yeah.
Yeah, but do you not think that it is? Like, because when obviously we had like Corbyn and McDonnell, and then we had people like Jess Phillips and kind of Keir Starmer on the other side. Do you not think it does cover that broad?
I think it's getting more that way. I think for a while, I think it lost some of its compass and went down a particular ideological route that I think might have been, I might well have agreed with. I don't think you could get a cigarette paper between me sometimes and Jeremy Corbyn in terms of policies, but I do think it was a presentation disaster. There's no. And I know a lot of people on the left are very purist and think, we don't have a presentation and populism and that doesn't matter. Well, it does. I mean, it really does. I mean, you can have, otherwise you've got a protest movement, you've got a debating shop. And I am unashamedly centrist in that I want me and my class to get our hands on the levers of power.
Right. And are you a member of a political party?
I am a member of the Labour Party. Yeah, I came very close to not being recently, but up until recently, but I'm beginning to have a bit more optimism for the future now, shall we say? Because again, it's an interesting time because some of the ideas in my book, basically the embracing of the state again. Well, the Conservative Party have been forced into it. It's going to be an interesting few years, really.
Yeah, totally. One thing I really liked about the introduction in your book was the bit where you said about we may be coming to realise that the people who complain about the nanny state are the people who had nannies.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a gag, but it's a gag that sums up what I mean. I loathe that term, the nanny state. Again, the Norwegians would go, what are you talking about, a nanny state? I loathe that gag. I loathe that phrase and how it's become used by people who've never had a nanny. You know what I mean? So you get, I could probably go back to Wigan and meet a bloke in a pub who's an ex-pitman or nanny state. It's like, well, hang on.
Totally.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has a nanny, and yet it's people like Jacob Rees-Mogg who use it in this disparaging way. I had a nana. I didn't have a nanny.
My nana, my grandma.
Exactly. But on my view of the state, I mean, to people like Jacob Rees-Mogg, the state interferes with the untrammeled acquisition of wealth. That's why they don't like it. Because if you've got a state there saying, whoa, hang on. Also, there's a state there providing libraries and education. Well, that means you're going to sell less books. I mean, and I want to sell books, but I also think there should be libraries. I think it's just... I'm a mixed economist in the sense I favor a mixed economy. The early part of the book, there's a section of the book called A Short Love Letter to Capitalism. I do not want the state to make my curries or clothes or pop music. I'm happy to leave that to private individuals. I don't think, though, those private individuals, I mean, I used to like quite a lot of records on Virgin Records. I used to like quite a lot of music on Richard Branson's Virgin label. I used to like a lot of stuff on there. I don't think he should be running the railways or the prisons or suing our National Health Service. I'm in favour of a mixed economy. I'm a grown up,
Yeah, totally. Was there a bit where you said about, I think you mentioned it in the bit you read, you said our story is different and ours is worth telling.
Yeah.
It almost feels like the dismantling of the welfare state is a purposeful attempt to kind of silence or control the narrative of these stories. Do you think that would be true? Do you think that's...
Yeah, I think to an extent that is true. I think part of that 1979 revolution in thinking wasn't just, it was partly about, I mean, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist, but there'll be, I don't want to be so conspiracy theorist and so sort of tinfoil helmet that you say, well, they're closing our libraries because they don't want the working class to have education or to have that power that comes with learning. But I mean, I do think there was something of that in it. I do think there was something of a fear, hand in hand in the 1970s, with the fear of the state. There was the fear of unions. There was the fear of the organization of the working class. You saw it just last week. I mean, you've got to be hard-headed about this. When the right-wing press started to bully and blackmail teachers into going back to work. We've had a few weeks of, oh, you're all marvelous heroes. Let's all clap the nurses. Because, and let's face it, I go out and clap the nurses and clap the care workers and clap the key workers. The ruling class will be quite happy for you to clap every Thursday night from here to eternity because it's a distraction.
Yeah.
It's all sweetness and light. But the minute you organize, the minute you put your dissent into practical terms, the minute you start to organize and fight back, they don't want that. Yeah. But a bit of sentimental clapping every Thursday night and little kids banging on saucepans. I love it too. But in the long run, they can accommodate that kind of stuff forever.
Yeah, I mean, the clap, I find it incredibly derisory to, give them money.
Exactly. I still do it. But I am starting to do it with ever more of, and I think a lot of people are beginning to feel the same. Give them some decent working conditions. Stop calling them unskilled and give them money.
Yeah, totally. There's a chapter which I particularly felt an affinity with, or kind of wanted to feel an affinity with. But I was born in 1981, okay. So I didn't quite have the same experience. It was the chapter I Sign On.
Yeah.
You talk a little bit about poverty porn and the disingenuous TV shows that Channel 4 make. But you also talk about how in the 1980s, you know, there was little stigma about the dole because pretty much everyone was on it.
Yeah.
You know, what was that like? I like the bit where you were talking to Richard Hawley about how musicians from that time were all, you know, on the dole, making music, able to kind of create art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Art. That's a good point. That is a very good point. I think people's conception of benefits has changed as well. People from my class, because of the policies instigated in 1979, by the middle of the 1980s, no one I knew left college and got a job. Everybody, to a certain degree or other, would have to be on the dole for a time. I was on for like a year or something like that. Richard Hawley and Guy Garvey were on for 10 years. You know, and whilst I don't want to romanticize the dole, I don't want to romanticize life on benefits, particularly not now when it is a lot less benevolent, a lot less, but it was, and I don't want to necessarily push this idea too hard that it was an alternative arts council.
I like that. I like that.
But it is, but I have had people say to me, I'm not sure about that. And I get that. Jarvis Cocker's not sure about whether he agrees with that. But certainly I don't think you were, maybe because the sheer amount of people on the dole was so big, there's so much. I don't think you felt as stigmatized. I think it was almost like a rite of passage for working class youth. I mean, I guess, you know, for other kinds of youth now, that it's a gap year or going traveling or finding yourself. Well, none of that would have occurred to me, or nor would have I had the finances to do it. So I worked on, you know, got casual work on a conveyor belt at great Universal stores in Wigan and spent long periods signing on. Yeah. But I don't want to romanticize it because, you know, I mean, you saw from the great art that came out, the Janet Boyce and the Black stuff. And I make the point that I was 16, 17, 18, whatever. So, you know, I wasn't a 40-year-old man who'd just been made redundant with a family to feed. So it was very, I appreciate it, very different for those people.
Well, because from my experience, I was on benefits of some kind for a decade. I was working, but the way that the system is set up now is that, you know, wages don't pay enough. So you're kind of reliant on housing benefit and, you know, working tax credits, that kind of thing. And if it wasn't for that system, then, you know, there is, for the welfare state, I wrote my book from a council flat. Yeah. I wrote my play in a homeless hostel. And I think the main difference is that in the 80s, you could afford to live whilst on the dole. Yes. But now there's just, you know, to get council housing, you do need to go through this system of being homeless, the kind of degradation of living in temporary accommodation. You don't know how long that is for. Yeah. It's for me, it does seem incredibly romantic. To have been able to sign on in the 80s and form a band and, you know.
Yeah. Yes, and I don't want to romanticize it too much, but it's certainly I don't think it's the same as it is now. I mean, one of the things I talk about in that, surely if we've learned anything from these last few months, is that universal basic income is a no-brainer of an idea now. Our benefit system has been a mess for the last 40 years because of tinkering from governments of every stripe, really, but particularly conservative governments, endless tinkering and endless callous disregard for ordinary people. UBI, you know, is to me, it is an idea whose time has come, and I can't see how anyone of any political stripe who doesn't see that it's a no-brainer now. We've pretty much got it now.
Well, I mean, we've got 2 million extra people on universal credit just since lockdown.
And the furlough system and the whole, you know, it's kind of UBI and all but name. So why not some grown-up government somewhere, probably somewhere like Finland or Norway, will do it, and then the rest of the world will follow suit, I think. Yeah.
You think that the current government would follow suit on something like
that? I hesitate to know what this. I went into this period. I had a conversation with my dad early on. It was locked down in Wigan with my mum. He was in a care home at the time and isn't now. And I said, you know what, Dad, I think this could be the Falklands. But that was in the very early days of it when Rishi Sunak, I think quite creditably and admirably, I don't have any great problem with Rishi Sunak. I think when he made those fairly authoritative statements in the first few days of getting a grip on this, I said to my dad, you know, this could be the Falklands, Dad, as in this could be a crisis that takes this government and bolster their popularity enormously. They could come out of this looking great. How wrong I was. This isn't the Falklands, this is the Suez. I mean, we are seeing now I don't think, you're seeing now even staunchly conservative people saying, what is going on?
Yeah.
And again, I don't want to make partisan political points. This isn't a Labour Party,
No, but it's hard. It's hard.
recruiting pamphlet, but it is hard to, but that lack of, you just get the feeling that some of the people, that Dominic Cummings and his sort, people have absolutely we're sick of experts apparently, but instead we've now got this weird class of uber geek weirdos, the kind of people you would have avoided in the student union bar. You know what I mean? The kind of person you would have gone, God, that guy's a weird creep.
Yeah.
They're in charge now.
I think you've summed it up perfectly.
Yeah.
I've got some questions from viewers. We came close to a socialist government in 2017, yet many on the left, including yourself, were extremely critical of the Labour Party at that time. Why?
I don't think we did come that close, really. Well, okay, I see what you mean. Because I felt that it had lost touch with a kind of core, what you might call a core constituency. I felt that the Labour Party had become incredibly London-centric, and I felt it had become a party of Islington. And I felt that it had I could do from my own experience that Labour Party's support was absolutely dwindling to its previous heartlands of the industrial north, which is exactly what happened. Which is exactly what happened in this election. And I'm just seriously a pragmatist. I really am a serious pragmatist. I just could tell that on the doorstep, people did not like Jeremy Corbyn. I know he was beloved of certain people on the Labour Party. He was beloved of lots of friends of mine. We argued about this a lot. I appreciate that. And I find that slightly the saintliness that was surrounded him.
The cult of Corbyn was.
I felt the cult of personality that surrounded him was really weird. I thought it was very ungrown up. I thought it was soft-headed. And I thought people should, and I just thought people, I could detect amongst people this idea of, well, the electorate will just have to grow it, won't they? Because we know that Jeremy's brilliant, and we know that the current drive of the Labour Party is brilliant, and they'll just have to come round to our way of thinking. Well, it's a bit like Brexit. I felt a bit like Brexit. The astonishment that some people on the liberal and middle class left felt when people voted to leave the European Union. Who knew that calling people an ignorant racist didn't persuade them? And that was essentially what the Remain campaign did. It basically wagged its finger at Wigan and Huddersfield and Wakefield and said, when are you ignorant racists going to wake up? Hey, who knew that doesn't persuade people,
Yeah. Another question. Writing is not a career many people can afford to do anymore, and stories from the working class need to be heard. What can we do about this?
This is something that exercises me a great deal. I've been involved in a project that's instigated by Kit de Waal, the writer Kit de Waal, called Common People, which is an anthology of working class writing, to which I guess a lot of people said to me, you're not working class. And I think, we can have a Marxist argument about this till kingdom come, about ownership of the means of production, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But what we can do, I think things are changing slightly for the better. I think we could do with some major publishing houses moving their offices out of London, to stop the London-centric nature of this. Goes for almost every element of our culture, though. And it will have to happen because London is becoming an unaffordable swamp. You know what I mean? All the ordinary workers are being leached out of London further and further out as it becomes merely a place where houses get more expensive. So that will have to come. That's the necessary thing that will happen. I think we need to try and have more working class people in positions of power in publishing houses. It is still an extraordinarily middle class, not to say even upper class game.
No, totally. Whenever I meet with my publisher, I just feel like the stupid little working class urchin that's kind of got the pity deal. It does often feel like that.
I have to say, worse than publishing, even worse than publishing, is our national print media. I would have to say that the level of if you look at most journalists on broadsheet newspapers are privately educated.
Yeah, and I think that probably kind of feeds the stigma that we have to the working class. The whole, whenever people interview me, they only want to talk about the bad stuff. This dark, sad working class life that I had before, as opposed to the writing. When middle class people don't generally get that, and that is because they just don't understand. They just don't get it at all. Another question for you. There's loads, by the way.
Okay.
Very popular. If Stuart could only choose one of these things for Lockdown Company, would it be music or literature? And what have you been listening to and reading?
My listening's been the same as always, because I am both, as a fan, I'm professionally obligated to listen to all kinds of music all the time, so that hasn't stopped. I've been what have I been doing? I've been reading some big books that I've been putting off for a long time, like Donna Tartt's The Goldfinch and Anthony Beevor's History of the Second World War. Nothing like sitting in a sunny garden with a gin and tonic, reading about the Siege of Minsk, in 1942. I've been catching up with some old TV, like Robert Hughes's brilliant Shock of the New about modern art. And I can recommend this warmly, because this is the kind of thing, this is the sort of nerdy thing that I like. There's a drama series on BBC 4 at the moment from Norway. I'm a real Scandi-phile, if that's the right word, which is about the birth of the Norwegian state oil industry, which makes it sound terribly boring, but in fact, really interesting. It's called Lickyland, or State of Happiness. And as well as being just brilliantly entertaining, there are whole sections of it where you think, yeah, this is what we could have done. Because of course, our story, to twist it back to the book, our story could have been very like the Norwegians. We discovered our North Sea oil riches about the same time as the Norwegians, and about the same time as Shetland did. Both those grown-up countries said, let's take 10% of all these profits and put it into a sovereign fund for our people. That's why even tiny villages in Shetland have a health centre and a swimming pool. And we said, no, let's just flog it all to whichever shiny, suited, greasy, used car salesman wants to buy it. That's been the story of our culture for 40 years. A kind of backstreet barrow boy mentality. But I'm not anti-business, but I am anti-worshipping at that altar slavishly and to the exclusion of everything else. Sorry, that wasn't really and I've been listening to I always listen to lots of crazy music from around the world, because that's what I put in my show, The Freak Zone, on the weekends and stuff. So yeah, it's been kind of business as usual, just the books have been a bit bigger.
So you're on the side of literature under lockdown.
Well, I couldn't live without music, I don't think. So I probably have to say music.
So is working class protest folk music still a viable channel to get unheard voices heard?
Working class protest folk music? That's interesting. I mean, folk, I'm not a folk expert. Folk has always been and still is at the moment divided by two kinds of people. I think there's a lot of what gets called folk music now that I would kind of call soft acoustic music, that, but I know that's a slightly purist thing to say. And I know there are some people on the other side who think folk music should all be putting your finger in the ear and singing songs about the whaling industry in Greenland in 1890. I'm neither of those positions. I don't know enough about folk to know if working class protest is coming through. I can recommend to everybody who doesn't know it, if you want to hear a brilliant modern folk song that will absolutely make the hairs on the back of your neck rise up, check out a song called Hollow Point. I won't say anything more about it. I won't give away what the song's about. A song called Hollow Point by a songwriter called Chris Wood. Listen to that song. And I remember being in the room at the Folk Awards, Radio 2 Folk Awards, when he played the song. And when it dawned on me what the song was about, I could feel my skin prickle. So people are writing modern protest songs about modern events like this. Chris Wood, Hollow Point, check it out.
I will do, thank you. Do you think that they're using this time as a cover for a no-deal Brexit? Do
you know what? I'm not smart. I'm not privy to that kind of information. And I genuinely don't think there's much of a plan going on. I mean, I don't honestly think that at the top level of this government, there's enough homogeneity or continuity of thought to do that. I think there are pockets of people. I'm sure Rishi Sunak and Dominic Cummings don't really see eye to eye on things. I honestly don't know. That would presuppose a level of planning and organization that I think we've seen in the last few weeks is just not happening in there. So no, I don't think there's any great plan about this at all. I think they are as confused as the rest of us.
Well, I mean, you definitely get the sense they're just making it up as they go along. There's no question about it.
Well, there is a line of thinking, it's been espoused by several eminent thinkers, an article in the New Statesman spelled it out quite recently. There is a line of thinking that says that this policy of non-policy, this policy of confusion, this kind of chaos beloved of Dominic Cummings, is actually serving a useful purpose, because when things do go wrong, they can't be to blame because they didn't suggest anything.
Yeah.
And I certainly think there's some of that thinking in basically saying to us, oh, do what you think best. I mean, the way they're handling the school issue is incredible.
Yeah.
Basically, well, send your kids to school if you want, but you don't have to. And you can go out, but then don't go out. Like, really, if you don't want to. I mean, it is. You could be cynical about that and think, I think, and said there's a certain amount of, well, if we don't provide any clear, it's a bit like I used to feel when people slagged off Tony Blair, when more people, more Corbynite than me, used to slag off Tony Blair for mistakes that were made in his, and there were, under his government. I used to always think, yeah, but if you never get into power, you'll never make a mistake. And I think there's a certain amount of that in the Conservative thinking now. If we don't take any kind of lead whatsoever, no one can ever accuse us of doing something wrong.
Yeah. No, there is a lot of that. Can we ever return to the days of full education grants, cheaper housing, non-zero hour contracts, etc.? Is it too far away from us now?
It shouldn't be, because in terms of how far away from us is it? Well, it's about an hour and 20 minutes out of Manchester to Oslo. I'll say it again. We have been pretty much unique in this bizarre experiment across Europe. I mean, there have been other parts of Europe, and I appreciate, I don't need telling that lots of other parts of Europe also had fascism for a lot of the 20th century. But post-1979, our zeal, our absolute swivel-eyed fundamentalist zeal for the privatization of everything has been pretty much a British disease. So is it that far away? Go to Oslo, go to Bergen, go to Tromsø, go to Tampere, go to Helsinki, go to Stockholm. You know, governments of every stripe in those countries, really, accept that the decently funded welfare state and a state sector is the right thing to do.
It's totally the right thing to do. But I guess the real question there is, how do you reverse it? Because people have to expect this. So the stigmatization, the privatization, it's just what we know now, isn't it?
I hesitate to be a romantic about this, but who knows? In the same way that the Second World War made a lot of people think we're not going back to the way it was before, and that prompted the British people's appetite for a grown-up progressive Labour government. Who knows? I'd like to think that some of those ranting, poisonous ideologues of the right that had the ear of people a lot, not that long ago, I'd like to think that they'll be a little bit fewer on the ground and less powerful, and other voices might come into the discourse and drown them out. Voices of, I'm not necessarily just saying left-wing voices, but voices across the political spectrum, but grown-up, progressive voices of the sort that have been in short supply for 3 years now, 4 years, well, for 40 years, but particularly in the last few years.
I hope too. I hope that happens.
You never know. That may be too romantic, rosy, spectacled a view. I don't know. But
it's an optimistic thought. I like it. Are you still a Britpop kid?
Oh, well, not really. No, but in the same way that I'm not on anything. I mean, I always think it's slightly tragic. I mean, no, I won't. That's not fair. I always think it's slightly tragic when you see people who are clinging to a tiny bit of the music of the youth. I've got too much new stuff to listen to, but I don't share. A lot of people. It became very fashionable to slag off Britpop. It became very fashionable to slag it off for maybe some of the right reasons. There were some terrible bands. There were some great bands. But I think it was like a one-night stand at a party. The morning after, a lot of people got very embarrassed about how enthusiastically they'd thrown themselves into it and all of it. And I wasn't to blame. Well, I was a bit to blame. I was entirely to blame for it.
It's all your fault. But
it's all my fault, and I'm sorry.
No, I mean, Britpop was my youth. I was 13 in 1994, so it was the soundtrack to growing up for me. Who was your favourite band? Oh,
it would have been Blur, because I was, I've written a book about Blur, and I was and still am sort of friends of theirs. So I hope. So they were the most interesting They were the most interesting, definitely. Yeah.
Right. Okay. There was a bit. Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. What would Nye Bevan make of all of this?
I get what Bevan. Well, I'll tell you what he would. And that was another thing that used to slightly worry me about the previous Labour administration. That I used to think that there was a little bit too much protectiveness went on about people. So that sometimes when anyone ever said to Jeremy Corbyn, when they wanted to ask him a question, quite often his minders, this may not have been his doing, but his minders would say, "Stop harassing him," and he'd scuttle away fearfully. And I used to think, Nye Bevan would have grabbed that microphone out of that reporter's hand and talked for the next 4 hours. I think what Nye Bevan would have done, and I don't want to join the cult of Nye Bevan, although I do think he was a great man.
Mm-hmm.
I think what he would have been was never off the telly. I think he would have never been off the telly, because he would have seen this as an ideal opportunity to put forward his views to people. So we'd have, as much as you can be, as much as you can. The obverse of that is, people have disappeared. Jacob Rees-Mogg, what happened to him?
Yeah, where's he gone? Yeah.
Where's he gone? It's almost as if someone's realised that his weird, anti-social, anti-state, anti-welfare state, posh boy oddness wouldn't go down well at the moment, isn't it? It's almost as if someone's locked him in a cellar somewhere.
Maybe they have, hopefully. We can only hope.
Exactly. I couldn't find it.
You say that kind of Corbyn didn't stand to the forefront and go on TV and stuff. Do you think that was a choice that he made? Or
No, I don't know. Well, I mean, I know a lot of people think, the media was stacked against him from the start. I'm not sure I joined that in with that much. I work in the media, and there isn't that. I mean, there is no. I work with people in the media who are staunchly communistically left wing, and people who are vaguely right wing. I don't think there is this stuff about MSM makes me laugh, particularly when it comes from Eamon Holmes. I mean, Eamon Holmes is the MSM.
I love all these men who think that they're kind of.
I know these men who think that there's some kind of Zamizdat guerrilla force operating on the fringes of society. You're on a couch talking about, you're on a couch. Anyway, that's a different thing. But I just began to. There was, I think, a slight feeling of, the media, they're always against us. There's so many right-wing papers. Hello, yeah, that's the way it is. We have to deal with the situation as it is, not a dream scenario down the line. And, that was what used to bother me. And I think I detected a certain aloofness sometimes that I don't think I need to dirty my hands arguing with people who don't agree with me. I could be somewhere else at a meeting. And this is not just about Corbyn, this is about quite a few people on that area of the left. We don't need to engage with people. We don't need to go out on doorsteps and engage with those idiot racists who might argue with us. We'd rather talk amongst ourselves.
Yeah, that's the problem, isn't it? Just bringing it back to your book, because that's why we're here, obviously. There was
still some copies available.
There's a wonderful section. I can't remember what it was called now, but it was Dr. Margaret Scargill. And
Arthur Scargill's daughter.
Yeah, please speak about that.
It's just a great bit. Again, it's a case in point. I think the chapter starts by me talking about there's some names strike fear into certain people. One of them, Scargill. Now, it doesn't strike fear into where I come from. It doesn't do that because Jacob Rees-Mogg probably, the name probably strikes absolute terror into his heart as a folk demon. Where I'm from, not everyone agreed with him, but a lot of people thought he was somebody who was actively campaigning to save the communities and livelihoods of his people. But anyway, enough of Arthur, who's still with us. But his daughter, Margaret, with her husband, Jim, set up a Cuban-style healthcare system in Barnsley. Now, again, I don't want to be seen to be saying everything about the Cuban system is right, because you'd be an idiot to say that. But one thing they do absolutely incontrovertibly have done better than us, or better than the way we've been going of late, is their healthcare system. And they recognize this, Jim and Margaret recognize this, and they've set up this incredibly enlightened one-stop healthcare system in Barnsley that could be a model for how we run our National Health Service. Not that we need more reforms in National Health Service, but New Labour went and had a look at it, but then didn't implement it properly. But yeah, I thought that was that's an interesting. My book's got little riffs like this in it about things I didn't necessarily know about beforehand, like universal basic income and the Cuban healthcare system. Just examples of how instead of rejecting everything that the state does out of hand, instead of this constant harping on the state's a bloated dinosaur, etc., that everything's best left to thrusting entrepreneurs like Philip Green and etc., and Alan Sugar. Well, we've realized, haven't we, through this mess that no, you can't trust those people. The much maligned, terrible old state and its low-paid, devoted workers are much more deserving of our support and sympathy.
Yeah, absolutely. What are the ways do you think we can champion a just and fairer society?
Well, I mean, I'm with Alan Bennett on this, that step one immediately is the abolition of all private education. Anything else, and I say this in my book, I have friends who send their kids, I've got friends who've been to private school for different reasons, mums and dads send them for different reasons. I've got friends who send their kids to private schools, but there's no getting away from it, that it's the single biggest engine of inequality in British public life. It's a cancer on our social culture, and it should go, because it isn't about making the education better. I mean, some people say this, it isn't that they get taught better. It isn't that they come out any brighter. It is that they have access, simply by being in those schools, they have access, utterly unfair access to networks of power. I mean, we know this. Our last two prime ministers have been old Etonians.
Yeah.
Do you think those two men are the brightest and best of British society?
No, I don't.
Obviously, they're not. They have attained their positions almost solely because of connections forged at private school. It's wrong. It's like Alan Bennett says. And I feel about it, it might make your life more difficult. If you send your kids to private school and you have to then send them to a poor, underfunded state school, it may make your life a little more difficult. But in the end, that's not an argument. Slavery is the same argument. You can say, well, I've got a slave. It makes my life a lot easier because I've got a slave. Doesn't make it right.
No, I agree. One more question, and then perhaps you could read another bit from the book.
Oh, I can, if you want me to find one, or we can squeeze in a couple more questions. I'm sure that's probably.
What would you prefer?
Well, maybe I'll just say how the book ends rather than read it, because it's kind of long. But let's take a couple more questions, and I'll just say how the book ends, because the way I wrote the end of the book has become horribly prescient now.
You're going to do an extra chapter, is that right?
I'm going to do revisions all the way through, I think, but I'm going to rewrite the entire last chapter, which maybe I'll say about in a minute if you want to take another.
Yeah, no worries. As part of the first generation of working class people to go to university and the last to do so freely, what do you think young people today should do to secure the right to free university education?
I will just say before I answer this that I do think, and I think this was a massive mistake by Tony Blair's New Labour government, I do think that Blair's drive towards getting half the people in Britain as he got to go to university was not necessarily a great thing. I think we fell into a trap of thinking every British kid had to go to university. And I don't think that's right for everybody. And I don't think it should have been. I think it was a way of making ourselves feel good about ourselves somehow. I think it'd be a decent apprenticeship scheme. If in many ways, if I had a kid of that age now, I'd say, unless you're absolutely committed to going to university, certainly if they wanted to be a writer, I might be tempted to say to them, do something else, do a job and write outside of that. Because, I think we were wrong to all worship the cult of the university education. It's not right for everyone. We need electricians. We need plumbers.
Yeah.
We need people like that, and we need to stop saying, oh, that's not as good as a university education. Yeah, it is. It is absolutely. And certainly I think for some people in the arts, spending 3 years doing an irrelevant subject and amassing a massive debt is not necessarily the best way of doing it.
No.
That's a separate argument. I guess it's the same thing I'd say about anything. You continue to vote for parties that make that happen. I don't know what, like I say, I don't know what will, if I would, is it still Transport House, the Labour Party, or it's Millbank, isn't it now? If I were there and I was part of their PR people, if I was part of their marketing people, I mean, I would already have the next Labour Party political broadcast nailed. You just show us all clapping on a Thursday night, and then you show the footage of the Conservative Party applauding themselves when they turned down a nurse's pay rise 2 years ago. Show that footage and say, this is what they clap for. This is what you clap for. This is what they clap for. I think we thought that's a winner. But anyway, that's slightly missing the point. I don't know how how do you affect change in our system except voting for a different party, voting for another government? And that's why I so want to see more progressive parties and more progressive party get its hands on government. I don't want us to be in a permanent purity of opposition, ideologically pure and in opposition forever. That's not good enough.
No.
That is letting working class people die.
Well, but why do you think working class people are voting Tory? I mean,
well, the old sociologist in me will tell you that a third of the working class always vote Tory. That's been the case since psephology and the studies of voting behaviour began. Yeah. There are so many reasons. Some people will blame the media, and I think the fact that when I used to teach sociology, I used to say to kids, which papers support which parties. And they would always say, the kids I taught in Skelmersdale, they would always say, oh, well, the Sun obviously supports the Labour Party. And I'd go, whoa, I'll stop you there. But they thought, well, they said the Sun's for like working blokes and working, men and women, white van man. And said, yeah. And it's staunchly Tory.
Yeah.
They didn't, they really, and they thought the Guardian was a Conservative paper because it was posh.
Posh. Yeah, of course.
So that, I think that not seeing that you are being fed a kind of propaganda every day in this country, I do accept that. I do accept that the completely twisted state of our media, our print media, doesn't help. But there's also other things as well. Some people just don't like to think of themselves as, what is it John Steinbeck said? There'll never be a revolution in America because the working classes of America don't regard themselves as working class. They regard themselves as temporarily disadvantaged millionaires. And there are some British people, I don't know. It is a mystery that brighter people than me have been brewing over and mulling over for 100 years now.
I've got time for one more question. Because my daughter she's been on her roller skates. She's been very good, very quiet. Go and tend to her. Do you have any plans for a new book?
I think the last 2 books have been vaguely political, and I think maybe I need a bit of a break from, particularly, I think this is quite a polemical political book. I think I might bring the lols a bit more next time. I like walking, I like travel. I think I might combine the two. The book before this combined those 2 interests. I rewalked the Jarrow March of 1936. I'm thinking maybe of a walk along the borders of the country, because we've seen in the last few weeks how we are not one country anymore. The way that Scotland and Wales have dealt with this crisis, so much better than England. And I'm wondering whether I could combine, when this is over and Britain starts to emerge from its shell again, if it does, I'm wondering if a walk, the Offa's Dyke Path and roughly Hadrian's Wall, those borders, and again, a sense of Britain after the lockdown, that might be my next book. But I think it'll be somewhere where I go places and meet people, because that's what I like doing. And I feel like doing it. I feel like, hanging out in some pubs and restaurants and eavesdropping on people and meeting people, which is what is at the heart of a lot of my books.
Sounds lovely. Well, I guess we better go. But do you want to?
Well, I was just going to say that the book ends with a discussion about Eyam in Derbyshire, and it ends with me asking myself the question: Eyam in Derbyshire is where the people isolated themselves from the plague back in the 1600s, in the early 1600s, isolated themselves for the good of the other communities. And I wondered if the thinking of the right and the left had made that kind of thing impossible, because you had the left obsessed with identity politics that said, my unfettered self-expression of myself is the greatest goal. I don't believe that. I think sometimes rubbing along with the common herd is the greatest goal. And you have the right saying there's no such thing as society. And so I wondered, could you have that self-sacrifice of a village like Eyam now? And I think I've been given my answer. Yes, you could. I think this, if any good thing has come out of this, it's shown that most British people are socially responsible. Most British people do pull together. I think when I rewrite that chapter and talk about Eyam, I'd say, well, we've seen lots of little Eyams now all over the country, and it's been quite heartening. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't be ever vigilant against the enemies, the real enemies of ordinary people, and because they're still there and they're still very powerful.
Well, thank you, Stuart. It's a wonderful book. I hope people buy it.
Me too.
You are as funny as Bryson and as wise as Orwell.
Well, I don't know about that.
It's a pretty big compliment, isn't it?
I don't know. I don't know about that, but I'll take it. Yeah.
I think you should. Thank you so much, Stuart.
Thank you.
Talk to you. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you so much to Cash and Stuart. That was a wonderful, wonderful event. Lots and lots to think about, some divisive comments, lots going off on Facebook, loads of questions for you, Stuart. I think for me, that line, this is your story and my story, and it was stolen from us, it really resonates with me. The book's great, like Cash said, and if you can go out and buy it, I highly recommend that you do. Hopefully from an independent bookstore, if you can get to one. Let's support our local bookshops. So that's it for tonight's event. Like I said before, the festival is free for all to join. If you'd like to donate, there'll be a link in the comment section. Again, sorry, that's my dog having a little bark at people. He lasted well. All of our donations will be split between Funds for Food Banks, South Liverpool Domestic Abuse Service and WOW. I'd like to take the time to thank all of our funders. That's Arts Council England, Liverpool City Council, the Institute for Creative Enterprise at Edge Hill University, Liverpool John Moores University and Unison Northwest. Like I said, there's lots more to come. We've got Jeremy Corbyn, which will be an interesting conversation at the end of the month. We've also got Glamru, who's the first Egyptian drag queen. That looks set to be a great event on Thursday. Check out our website, which is www.wowfest.uk. We've got monitoring forms. You never escape them from WOW, and there'll be a link for that. Let us know what you think about the event. We love feedback, and that's how we kind of structure things going forward. WOW also run projects all year round, so you can have a look at our website to see a lot of the other things that we'll be doing. We've got some exciting news coming up about that. We've been WoWFEST. I've been Emma. Please keep safe and well. Thanks a lot and see you soon. Bye.